My name is Cherlynn Stevens, and I currently live in Waldorf, Maryland in the United States. And this is my dog, Bobs, who's joining us today. He's a real sweetheart, and he goes with me almost everywhere. So I was born in 1957 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and a week later, my family moved into our first home. And actually, it was the only home we had. We grew up there. I grew up there. My siblings grew up there. And we purchased this home in a little town called Hamden, Connecticut, which is right next to New Haven, where Yale University is located. Many people know Yale. My mother and father, I don't know how they met. None of us know where or when they met. But they both had children from previous marriages. So I had the benefits of a very mixed family. And I have two sisters and one brother. He just passed away recently from cancer. And one of my sisters lives in Canada, and the other sister is in Fresno, California. My mother was a nurse. She was a registered nurse, which was pretty uncommon back in the 50s and 60s for an African-American woman to have that level of education. And my father was adopted, so we didn't know very much about him and his background, but he was a musician. He did many, many things. He's what you call a jack of all trades, but his heart and soul was in music, and he played the xylophone, the marimba, he played with Lionel Hampton. So music was something that ran through daily life, in my household. I learned to play the flute. My father selected that. He said there aren't too many black girls out there that know how to play the flute. He always wanted us to be distinguished in some way. Between myself and the next sibling, my sister Bernice, there's 8 years between us and 9 and 10 years between myself and the other two. So I really kind of grew up kind of on my own once they were all out of the house. I was there pretty much by myself, yeah, because of that age difference. There are a few memorable things that I'm still trying to forgive my sisters for, but like pushing me off the porch steps into the rose bushes because they didn't want me to come along. That's something that happens sometimes when you're the very youngest child and you want to go with your older brothers and sisters, and they really are tired of you carting you around. And I still to this day do not know which sister actually pushed me into the bushes. Neither one of them has confessed, although I have my strong suspicions who it was, but I won't say. In the 1960s, here in the United States, there was a lot of civil unrest. There was a lot of contention and argument, even within the African American community, a lot of discussion about what it means to be black, what it means to be African American. These were new languages, new terms that were being used. My parents came up with the words Negro and color, refer to oneself. And that generation, the Martin Luther King Jr. generation, the Black Panther generation, they were saying, no, 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 we're black, we're African American. These were new terms that were being discussed and talked about. And where I grew up, there was a lot of diversity, racial diversity, a lot of diversity in the way people looked. And so you could have someone who was black or African American be very pale. It was a very, very volatile time. To have white friends at that point in time was unacceptable, by many of the African American kids in the community, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, because the presumption was all white people are bad. And of course we know that's not true. All of any one people is not bad nor good. But what's really interesting, that's a little bit of the background about what was going on in those days. What was really interesting was one day I was sitting, and actually I was still in elementary school. And the elementary school that I went to was across the street from my home. Okay, I could see it from my house. And it was about 3 or 4 stories high, a brick building. And I happened to be looking out the window. One day I'm in class, maybe 10 a.m. in the morning, and I happen to look out the window. And oh my gosh, down this little suburban street are rolling these military tanks. I mean, with the guy in the turret, that goes around with the gun. And I mean, my jaw just dropped. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And so what I was witnessing, and I found this out later when I got home, I was witnessing the National Guard had been called out by the governor of Connecticut to have tanks brought in to the New Haven courthouse, because on that particular day, members of the Black Panther Party were being tried. Okay, and that was a really big deal. But it gave me an early consciousness, about race and racism and the injustice of it for all people involved in that. Bobs and I are on our way to go see my good friend Nasrin Rashidi in Fort Washington. She's invited us over for tea with our good friend Crystal Powell. Although I went on to complete 2 master's degrees en route to my PhD, I never finished high school. My mother became ill at a young age, and school just kind of fell by the wayside for me. So I had to kind of raise myself during those ensuing years, from about 12 on up. So I never really completed high school. I was busy taking care of myself, because my father wasn't able to. Her illness really shook him, greatly. And because of that age difference between myself and my other siblings, that 8, 9, 10 years, they were gone. There was no one else there. In the state of California, if you had not finished your high school degree, but you successfully completed courses at the junior college or the 2-year college, you could then go on and earn your 4-year degree. And that's what I did. And so that's how I was able to get my undergraduate degree and then, my master's and so on without the high school diploma. So I moved to California, and like I said, I was there, with my sister for a few months. Got my first job. Oh my God, it was great. It was good to have a first job, right? But I worked in Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I would come home every night just smelling like that oil. It was terrible. Oh my God, I didn't eat chicken for years. During that time, during that period, actually while I was in Fresno, I had really been searching. I was deeply, deeply unhappy and really wasn't sure why. I knew something was missing. Things felt very hollow, a deep emptiness, and I thought, oh, okay. It's because I don't have a good job. And I got a good job. I started as a secretary, became a sales manager, very quickly within a year, first woman to do it, first Black woman to do it, and I got the car. That didn't do it. And then I got, the nice apartment and the clothes, but I was still very, very empty. And I said, oh, I know. It's because I don't have a relationship, it's the relationship that's missing. So I got a relationship. And that didn't do it. Still feeling very, very hollow. Something was missing in my life. And I said, oh, I know. I haven't fulfilled my desire to be a mother. That must be it. So I decided to have a child. And I had my daughter. Now, while I was pregnant with my daughter, I realized that this still wasn't it. And I also needed a lot of help raising my daughter. And I have to step back a little bit. After the first year when I moved to California, my mother passed away. And my oldest sister was in Germany. She flew in from Germany and I flew in from California for my mother's funeral. And people are consoling me and they're saying, oh, don't worry, you'll see your mother again. And so I asked my aunt what that meant, this phrase from the Bible, you'll see this, your loved ones again. And I said, what does that mean? What does that really mean? And she was of a sect or division of Christianity called Jehovah's Witnesses. And they believe that a certain number of people, a very specific number of people, like 4,000, will be able to come back to the earth when the world is renewed. And that I would see her then, and that surely she and I would be one of those 4,000 people. So I thanked her very much and thought to myself, that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I couldn't imagine, that God would turn away hundreds of millions of souls, who had not known Jesus Christ. Or, how could you say only 4,000 people would come back? That made no sense. So I asked my sister, I said, Regina, what does that mean to you? And she says, well, I'm a Baha'i. And I said, well, what's that? And she didn't really tell me very much. And she says, that's my faith. And I said, oh, that's interesting, And I said, well, what do you think this means? And she says, well, it means that when the body dies, it's like a bird in a cage. And the cage is this physical body. And the cage opens up, but your soul flies forward and goes free. And that we take with us our memories. We recognize people, many of the things that we have with us now, they go with us, except the physical body stays. And I thought to myself, and I said, well, that makes a lot more sense to me. That made sense than this other thing I'd been told. And so she didn't tell me very much, but she gave me this book, and it's right here. It's called Thief in the Night. So I took this book back with me to California. I think I started reading it on the plane. I thought, my gosh, now remember, I'm only 17, 18 years old. But I read this book and I thought, wow, it read like a great mystery novel. And I like mystery novels. It just really captured my attention. And this guy named William Sears wrote this book. He was a Catholic, and he said about he and some friends were sitting around in the newspaper room one day. They were reporters, and they were trying to say, what would be the most fantastic headline that we could ever publish? And they all kind of came to the conclusion that Jesus Christ had returned. So he set out to research this, and he did a fantastic job of researching not only Christianity, but also Islam, and how both faiths came to the same year, 1844, as the date when these phenomenal returns would occur. And I read this book and I thought, oh my God, this is a great mystery. It's so well documented. He documents the Quran, he documents the Bible, every quote that he uses in there. It was fascinating. And I thought, wow, a new manifestation of God has appeared. That is so huge. I don't know what to do with that. So fast forward now, a year or so later, maybe two. So I had my daughter, or I was pregnant with my daughter, and realized that I had done all those other things, done all the material, earthly things, but yet I still had this deep, deep, deep emptiness. And then I said, okay, maybe it's because I haven't accepted Jesus Christ as an adult. So here I am now, several years later as a young woman, about ready to have a child in a few months, and realizing that perhaps I need to connect with Christ personally. I'm kneeling on the floor in front of my bed, praying, like this, blank wall in front. And I'm just supplicating, and I'm just asking Jesus Christ, please accept me. Please accept me. And a very beautiful thing happened. And on this blank wall, I saw this outline. And I heard this voice. Excuse me. And it said, I've always loved you. I've always accepted you. And I felt such love. I just felt wrapped in love. And I just cried tears of gratitude. I was very grateful to know that Christ, had not forsaken me, and that I was loved, and that there was some place for me. And then I asked a question, and I said, so what church do I go to? I wanted to know. I didn't want to be alone in my love of God. And I said, what corner do I stand on? The answer I got was, you won't stand on any corner. You'll be in the middle. I'm like, in the middle? What does that mean? It took me a while, but after I became a Baha'i, I understood what that meant. Because as Baha'is, we understand that God has always renewed his covenant with humanity. So all of the major prophets of God, Muhammad, Abraham, Adam, Moses, Zoroaster, Krishna, Buddha, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah, they all come from the same God with the same spiritual teachings. It's just the social teachings that have been updated and revised each time a new manifestation appears. So in that way, and because Baha'is love and acknowledge and respect all of these great religions of the world, we don't stand on any corner. We're in the middle, and we embrace them all because we recognize that spiritual truth that they all bring. And so then I understood what Christ was telling me.
It's only light. It's only
In a previous year, I had gone to visit my eldest sister. She had given me a book, which I had never opened up, never looked at. It was called Marriage, A Fortress for Well-Being. And I started reading that, and I read the words of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, and I just fell in love. I just fell in love, and I knew that was it. And I called my sister up in Texas, and I said, where are these Baha'is? How can I find out more? I need to talk to them. So she, made some calls, and this is in Long Beach, California. That's where I live then. And I got connected with the Baha'i community there. And within a short period of time, I became a Baha'i. One of the things about being a Baha'i are the many social principles, of the Baha'i faith that I had always believed and felt in my heart, but never heard articulated, or spoken, as principles to live by. The elimination of all kinds of prejudice and discrimination, the things I experienced as a young girl and was very much against. Independent investigation of the truth. That's a principle, of the Baha'i faith. Don't just take someone's word for it. Read, investigate yourself, use your own head and heart. Where I met my husband, and he was a member of the Baha'i community, had been a Baha'i for some years, and he and I got married about a year later and had another daughter. So after I married, had my children, I started college because I really was searching again. Okay, wow, I felt, if you've ever seen a rose bud, and it's tight in the early spring, and they're just so tight, and they eventually blossom open into these big flowers. And at that time in my life, I felt like one of those roses that was blossoming, when I found, because it was so empowering, I found a sense of purpose and not only skill sets, but how to consult. Consultation's a very big thing that we work very hard at, in the Baha'i community, and how to consult with people. And I just grew and knew I wanted to be able to serve the faith, serve communities around the world. And then I moved to Wisconsin for graduate school. That's where I went there for that, and completed that there. 2 masters. I was in a PhD program but stopped, so my husband and I divorced. And 2 kids as a single parent in grad school, that's an awful lot. That's an awful lot. So that's what I did, and worked at the university, had a number of really interesting positions, throughout my life. And then I moved here to Maryland, and I took a federal job and in IT of all things, and did that until I took an early retirement a couple of years ago. So now I am ready to go. And I've sold my home and most of my possessions, and I'm preparing, I'm applying, and asking to be considered for where my skill sets can best be of use, in the Baha'i community around the world. The Baha'i faith's not preachy, okay? Your relationship is between you and God. What you read in the writings or don't read, that's your choice. And you do things based on where you are in that relationship with God. And so for me, someone who as pretty much being alone. I didn't have a lot of structure. So the Baha'i faith helped provide some of that for me. It provided guidance. I used to swear terribly. Before I became a Baha'i, oh, every other word was the swear word. I was quite prolific at it. I think about it. When I became a Baha'i, I said, oh, I can't do this. You know, I stopped immediately almost. And why? Because I read a passage in the Baha'i writings that still sticks with me to this day, and I quote it often, you know, and let me see if I can get it right. The power of the spoken word is so strong. I'm paraphrasing, but you know, the spoken word reverberates throughout the universe. Every word you utter reverberates throughout the universe. That is incredible when you think about that. My God, what do you want coming out of your mouth, lasting for eternity, going through the universe? It's not foul language, trust me. Well, thank you for letting me share my experience with you today. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even cried with me a little bit. I still cry 37 years later. Everybody's got their own path and their own way to follow it. We hope you'll explore the Baha'i faith and meet others on that journey with you, and know that you're loved no matter what path you choose.